repeat some questions. Next slide. So these are just our meeting agreements, just so everybody knows like how to come together and have a really great conversation. Like I mentioned, the meeting is going to be recorded. We fully encourage constructive and meaningful meeting experience for all our attendees, which means we really want to hear your questions. We really want to hear your thoughts. That's what we're here for tonight. So if you're online, you will have the opportunity to share your thoughts using a website. And if you're in person, before you started, there was these boards here, and then before you leave, if you're welcome to do that, but you can also ask us questions throughout the meeting. So for in person, just raise your hand. We'll call on you. If I can read your name, I'll say David or something like that. And for online, there's a public participation website that we're going to go through quickly that you can use to share comments, ideas, and to ask general questions. If you have any questions regarding any technical difficulties, feel free to put it in the Q&A, and Shoshana can help you with that. Next slide.
Wendell, before you go forward, can you switch the camera so the online people can see you? Currently, we're seeing the room, which is helpful for the online folks, just so you can see how these different things work. We have people in person that Wendell is helping with, and then as you can see, Wendell is at the front of the room. So we'll switch the camera as needed, but for right now, we'll have it at the front.
Thank you. Hi again. All right. So again, welcome. I am Wendell. I am the public participation planner. So I recently began with DVRPC in the spring, and now we're almost back there again. So you guys are going to be seeing a lot more of me. Tonight we have a mixture of DVRPC people here to present to you guys on our public participation and community outreach strategy. So the point of tonight's meeting is to share with you guys how DVRPC in the past year has been working to do a lot more engagement and outreach and different techniques that we have been using, and to get some ideas and suggestions from you guys on how you like to be reached out to and how you think we can better promote the work that we're doing here, the great work we're doing here across the region to some of your community members. Next slide. So this is our agenda for this evening. So over here, we have Allison Hastings, who's going to go over our federally required outreach. And then Gina Meyer was the one that everybody met outside next to the pizza. That's not where she was hanging out, but that's where she was. And she's going to be going over our communication and marketing strategy. And then Amani Bay is online, and they are going to be doing our EJ focus group. So we recently had a environmental justice focus group that went pretty well for the long range plan. And Amani is part of that team, and they're going to be going through that. And then over here, we have Marissa Volk, who's going to be discussing the work that she and her team have been doing in Trenton regarding bicycle and pedestrian access. Next slide. So this is just an overview of what DVRPC is. So for anybody who may not be familiar with the agency, thank you so much for coming tonight and getting to know us. This is a really great first-time meeting. We work across 2 states, so Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Across 2 states and 9 counties. So we work with a lot of people, top to bottom. Our region is probably like a 3-hour drive. So we really try to make sure we work with everybody. And again, that's why we're here tonight, just to hear more about people and how they like to be interacted with across the region, because we understand from small towns to large cities that we have it all here. Next slide. And again, if you're new to DVRPC, here are some ways that you can learn more about us. So if you go on our website at dvrpc.org/data products, you can find all the great reports and all the great data that we've been collecting across the region. And feel free to reach out to us if you want to figure out how to use it in your own day-to-day life, or if you work for another agency, or if you're part of a neighborhood association. Like, that's what all of this is for, is to help build better communities across the region. And then PPTF, so the Public Participation Task Force, is a forum that provides ongoing access to the regional planning and decision-making process. So we have a lot of different committees here at DVRPC, and the PPTF is one of the most external committees, I would say. We work closely with community members, so it's not just professionals who work within the planning, engineering, construction field, but with people who day-to-day are just leaders in the community or would like to be leaders in the community, who want to know more about transportation, who want to know more about urban planning, who just want to know more about how they can support their community and help DVRPC do better studies and projects in their community. And that's what the PPTF is for. If you look on the tables, we are actually currently, I'm going to do a couple plugs for this, asking for new members. So every year, we take the time out to look over applications and then select new members. And we have a couple members in the room. So Jared is here. Mary Ann's a member back there. So if anybody has any questions about what it's like to be a member in the Public Participation Task Force, feel free to reach out to them. Feel free to reach out to me. And then feel free to reach out to Shoshana online. All right, for everybody who's online, howdy again. So if you go to the publicparticipation.dvrpc.org/pptf, you'll be able to join the conversation and share your thoughts and ideas about how DVRPC could support your community through public participation and engagement. Click. So yes, register to participate. You could just click through all that. And then you'll go up to DVRPC committees, and then that's where you'll find the public participation task force. That's where you'll find out more information about us. That's where you can find a link to apply. That's where you can find important links. So like our event calendar is there, key dates, which includes all of our meetings, most of our meetings up to the summer for next year. So we have members only meetings. So if you're part of the public participation task force, those meetings are for you. And then we have public meetings like the one tonight. So you can see a beginning of a schedule there. And then at the bottom, you'll see the options to share your ideas, to tell us how you like to be reached out to. And then if you have any questions for DVRPC, you're welcome to put them there as well. And we will try to respond to them as soon as possible. And the great thing is that once you put your questions on this website, once we respond, everyone can see your question and our response, and it helps your neighbors across the region learn more about how we work. All right. So we're going to start off with Allison Hastings, who's Associate Director of the Office of Communication and Engagement.
Thank you. So I'm, again, Allison Hastings with Communications and Engagement at DVRPC. I'm going to talk about the not fun stuff, but the important stuff around public participation. Can you go on to next slide, Shoshana? About why we do it and why do we have to do it? And then where is it that says that we have to do it? It's through federal regulations as a federally designated organization. We're a metropolitan planning organization, federally designated. We get U.S. Department of Transportation funds. And so therefore, we are responsive to U.S. Department of Transportation requirements. So DVRPC, we get to create our own public participation plan and adopt our own theories, our own styles, own methodologies around public participation. There's several out there in the world. We happen to subscribe to IAP2, the International Association of Public Participation, their spectrum of public participation. So this is an international organization that has very inclusive ideas around why we do public participation. What does it mean to participate? How do we participate? How do we include people in a room or the figurative and literal room? So DVRPC subscribes to the IAP2 spectrum of public participation. And what's really important here in this graph is that there's different types of reasons for engaging the public. And so there's the most passive on one end, which is inform, all the way to the most involved, or not to use that other word, but the most kind of co-creation, which is empower. So there's a spectrum of types of public participation. And we at DVRPC use a lot of these types of participation to inform our work. And so I'm going to go over a couple different forms of how we use this spectrum and the techniques that we use. And you'll hear about that tonight too. So next slide. So there's lots of ways that we invite the public to participate. So here's some examples. So one is consulting, asking folks to give us input into something. We'll take all of that input and then produce something from that input, and put something out. So a good example of that type of technique is doing, I wanted to set a timer for myself. So a survey is a great example of like consulting with the public, inviting the public to give us their input. We'll use their input and come back with something. Down at the bottom is a picture of one of my colleagues who's presenting at an event. Presenting at an event is a great way to inform the public about the work that we're doing. Inform is usually one way. It's putting information out, trying to be transparent about our information, putting as much information out there. We're informing the public about what we're doing. And that's a really important part of public participation. Another way, so when people think about public participation, a lot of times they think about a room with people and boards, like an open house or a charrette, a workshop, ways to involve people in in the project. So you're involving folks in digesting the information, maybe proposing some recommendations, and involving is another level up in the public participation spectrum. It's a longer term engagement with the public on a specific issue or project. Collaborate. We don't do much collaboration because we don't own we don't own anything. We're not implementers. But I put up this example because I think it's a good one. Parking Day is like this like an international event that happens once a year where people are asked to like reimagine a parking spot, take it over for a day. What would you do? DVRPC has done that in the past, where we've done like a demo, an interactive activity in a parking spot for the day and interact it with folks. I put here collaborate because like in my town or the town next to me, Collingswood, collaborate is when people get to create something with the local government or the project sponsor. So they're involved all the way through implementation. And in Collingswood, I use this as an example. There was a parking day idea that actually a person built a movable park. And now the town lets the movable park circulate down different parking spots in front of different shops, coffee shops, whatever. So that's an example of like a community driven idea that the municipality got behind and helped create with them. So collaborate's another form of public participation. All right, now I'll get to the less fun stuff, the legislative basis. So why do we do public participation? The not fun answer is because we have to. And there's a long legislative basis for this. And I think this is really important for folks to understand. Federal legislation matters a ton, and it matters on how an organization operates every day. It also it matters about how we get around every day. It affects us from the individual person all the way up to an organization. So we've been around for almost 60 years. We've done public participation in some form since at least the 1970s, so for at least 50 years. We didn't necessarily have to do public participation until the federal transportation legislation in 1991 called ICE-T, Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. And this was a major change to how federal funding was distributed. And it also put the importance of planning at the forefront of transportation projects. So not just using federal funding for construction, what's all the stuff that needs to happen prior to construction? ICE-T was a seminal piece of legislation that really changed the transportation industry and transportation planning. Next slide. So legislation's iterative, and I use this example, this paragraph that comes from a federal law, comes from the federal transportation legislation. And I use the colors here to show that through all the iterations of the federal transportation bill, how they've defined who we need to interact with, how they've defined the public has changed, has increased. So, so this is a definition of interested parties that we use as the basis for public participation. So each metropolitan planning organization shall provide citizens, that's an important word, it will change, citizens, affected public agencies, representatives of public transportation employees. Public ports was added by the 2015 Federal Transportation Act. Freight shippers, providers of freight transportation services, that was added in the 1998 version. Private providers of transportation, and then getting specific about what those private providers of transportation are inner city bus companies, employer-based commuting programs. So they're expanding the definition. Representatives of users of public transportation, again, added in the 1998 legislation. 2005 added representatives of users of pedestrian walkways and bicycle transportation facilities. So that all of a sudden elevated the importance of active transportation, multimodal transportation, people-centered transportation, representatives of the disabled. So over time, that paragraph has really changed and expanded our charge to interact with as many different people as possible and given us ideas on how to do that. Next slide. So we now are living under the 2021 federal transportation legislation, which is called, these are wonderful acronyms. I have the list all written out of what they all mean too. So IIJA is our current federal transportation bill, and it stands for Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I actually think it's one of like the cleanest versions of all the federal transportation bill acronyms. I think it's like the simplest. And they took that same paragraph that we just looked at and made major revisions to it. And not just major revisions, that what they were really focused on is the how. So how do MPOs do this? So now what they're saying is that the MPO shall, and that's another important word, shall, develop and use a documented participation plan that defines a process for providing no longer citizens, because that's a smaller group of people that we serve. We serve more than citizens. We serve individuals. So providing individuals. And then down at the bottom, they get more specific about that we need to provide reasonable opportunities to be involved in the metropolitan transportation planning process. So not just one time getting input into the long range plan, but all the time getting input into what DVRPC does on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. And there's a history of our public participation plans. You can go past that. I'm short on time. If you want to look it up, you can get a copy of our public participation plan. It's online as well as right here at DVRPC printed out. Next slide. We have really important priorities. These are our guideposts, what we go back to on a regular basis. So we do have an emphasis on reaching out to traditionally underserved groups, doing more outreach in communities that are underserved. We do communications, public outreach is also around public awareness around DVRPC. We really tried to create meaningful opportunities for meaningful public input, and the Public Participation Task Force is a great way to do that on a regular basis. Next slide. And I want to also call to attention that there's the everyday public participation. DVRPC exists as a regional organization that works in between levels of government with the general public. We're created to help the general public inform and know about the transportation planning process, how billions of dollars, federal dollars, get spent on transportation projects. So the everyday part of public participation, which we don't always document in a public participation plan, is that we get calls and emails. We have forms on DVRPC's website. We get calls, for SEPTA, and SEPTA isn't always easy. It isn't always easy to access someone at SEPTA, but we respond, and that's a major thing that we do. We also, I think this is worth it to note, we put staff contact information out on the website. That means that we're accessible and we're reasonably transparent. And our board members who make the decisions, their information is on the website. Don't tell them, but but it's really important that the public know that their board members represent them at DVRPC, and so they can also get their comments directly to the board member that represents them. And then there's public comment periods or public comments at monthly board and RTC meetings. So it's a way that the public can inform the day-to-day business of DVRPC. And then there's official public comment periods that are big, hefty administrative processes that we go through to open up a complicated document for public comment. And so we do about 3 of those a year. And I think that's it. I'll to Gina.
While Gina is fixing the Zoom, we have a couple minutes to ask Allison any questions. Any ladies that have questions for Allison? Did everything you're doing? If you guys have questions for Allison.
Wendell, I want to point out it's not there to hide the toolbar.
All right.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Gina. I'm with the Office of Communications and Engagement, and I'm going to be talking about our communication strategies around a public engagement using a case study of a recent project, which was Vision Zero Hunting Park. Shoshana, can you go next slide? And actually, you can go again, please. So a little background about the project. The City of Philadelphia adopted a Vision Zero action plan that aims to eliminate traffic deaths by the year 2030. They asked DVRPC to take a look at a stretch of Hunting Park Avenue from Old York Road to Wissahickon Avenue and make safety recommendations to make it safe for all users of the road. This section of the road was selected because it's part of the city's high injury network, which is the 12% of Philadelphia streets that account for 80% of crashes in the city. Next slide. For this outreach, we had a mix of public engagement strategies. I'm going to go into depth into a few of these, but I just want to point out that the study corridor did reach the low English proficiency threshold for Spanish speakers. So we did make sure that all of our materials were in both English and Spanish. And we worked closely with our planning partners and a group of community stakeholders. And we also worked with one of the city's Vision Zero ambassadors who is a Hunting Park resident, a block captain, and was really helpful in informing like what we chose to do for our outreach in the summer. Next slide. So we kicked things off by convening a meeting for community stakeholders. We reached out to over 25 local organizations and offices of politicians from the area. And not everyone who we invited was able to attend, but we did have really great representation. Some of the organizations that were there were Called to Serve CDC, the Nicetown Tioga Improvement Team, Broad Germantown Collaborative, Hunting Park Connected, Hunting Park Community Garden, Esperanza, and more. We also had representatives from City Council President Clark's office, PA State Representative Parker's office, and PA State Senator Street's office. And actually Senator Street himself did attend the meeting. One of the things that we did, we asked about their safety concerns, asked how are the best ways to talk or connect and reach with people in the community, who should be in the room, who's not in the room, to make sure that we're reaching out and connecting with the right organizations. And one of the things that we also surveyed, so we gave some poll questions on our engagement strategies that we typically use and sort of got a feel for what they thought would work best in that community. One of the things we heard a lot was that online public engagement would not be sufficient, that it was very important to be in the community, and that, you know, we should make sure that we make that effort. We should attend existing events, host our own event, and send mailings on the street to people on the street. Next slide. So I have an outline, a rough outline of our communications efforts. The study team works on this project for the whole year, but our efforts are really sort of focused in two areas, once in the fall and once in the spring, and they're specifically around engagement opportunities. And so you can see we convened the community stakeholders meeting in September. In October, we officially announced the project publicly with a joint press release with the city. And then to coincide with that press release, we had a project page live on our website or on the Engagement HQ platform. We did mail postcards to 1,900 residents along the study corridor. We flyered along the corridor. We created a partner toolkit that our community stakeholders could share with their communities. And we also ran a paid social media ad advertising a survey where we were collecting information on what residents thought of current conditions, what safety concerns they had. For fall events, we attended already existing events that other organizations put on. We did intercept surveying, which is when you sort of post up along the corridor and try to stop people who are walking by, take a survey. And we continued to promote the survey through social media. For the second half of the communications efforts, the study team had come up with their recommendations, and we were taking those to the community and getting their feedback. We hosted a community event and advertised in a similar method that we did with the fall, with postcards, flyers, partner toolkit, social media, and we also did a newspaper ad. And the final step in the process will be a final promotion of the report, which hasn't happened yet. We're waiting for final sign off from our partners in the city, which I think will happen any day. So the report is just, should be out soon. And at that point, we'll close the loop by going back to the communication stakeholder groups, all the different people we talked to along the way, to say, here it is, here's the final report, so that they have the opportunity to see it. We'll also promote it on social media and share it in the DVRPC newsletter. Next slide. So I have some of the materials and images from the fall outreach. There's the press release, a photo of a flyer with a QR code and tearaways that was hanging in a business along Hunting Park at Wissahickon Avenue. There's the social media graphic. In the bottom left corner is the postcard that we sent out. And you can see in the right corner of the postcard, we did have an incentive for people completing the survey. They had the opportunity to win a $50 Visa gift card. Then there are photos from intercept surveying. And then the photo on the bottom right is from Haunted Hunting Park, which is a trunk or treat event that was really wonderful. About 3,000 people attended it. We gave away a lot of candy. We had to go out and buy more candy about an hour into it. We weren't quite prepared. Next slide. And for the summer outreach, we had a lot of the same materials, but we did do a Spanish language ad in the newspaper Impacto. Our partners at Esperanza recommended it. And then we have photos from our event, which took place right on the study corridor. It's at where Roosevelt Boulevard and Hunting Park meet, and it forms a little triangle with Carlisle Street. We shut down Carlisle Street for the day, which is one of the recommendations in the report, is to close that street. And so we could demo that, and we had a food truck there. And so people who participated by looking at the recommendations and filling out the survey received a free meal afterwards. Next slide. So a little bit summary of the numbers, the fall outreach. We did 3 community events. We did 1 day of intercept surveying. And also one thing that I don't have mentioned here is that one of the community stakeholder groups called to serve, they also took surveys to one of their meetings and had people complete them there. The survey was available online for 2 months, and it was advertised with a paid social media ad. We had the $50 gift card. Overall, we've received 405 total surveys. Once it'd been cleaned, we did get bot activity. So there's probably about 1,000 more invalid online surveys. So the breakdown between paper and online is there. We did find that the paper surveys tended to represent people who live directly in the study area or in the zip codes surrounding the study area, where online it was from a wider pool of outside the study area. So for spring outreach, we really focused on getting into the neighborhood and getting the community feedback. So the online engagement part, we still had it, but it wasn't emphasized. So we did not do a paid social media ad. We did have an incentive, but it was only at the event. And overall, we got 57 total surveys, 48 in person at our event and 9 online. Next slide. That is it. I do have our URL, dvrpc.org/hunting park. It'll take you to the Engagement HQ page, which has a place where you can sign up if you want to receive information. So when the report is published, you could get notified that way. Any questions? Yes. I think it's just a Vision Zero Hunting Park. Yeah.
For people who are asking questions, oh, there we go. I was gonna say to make sure to use the mics.
Yeah. Did anybody in the room have any questions for Gina regarding what she just presented on? Well, she'll be here after if you have more questions. No rush. Shosh, is there any questions from online?
There are not, but if folks have stuff throughout the presentations, you can feel free to put comments in the chat, as well as put stuff in the Q&A portion.
All right. Jared, are you trying to ask a question? Here. Use mine. It's here.
Yeah, I just got one. With the community outreach public meetings, was there any talks about improving the sidewalks and making it more bicyclist safety since that's a heavily populated area?
So the safety improvements sort of ran the gamut from like better lighting, better like installing park benches, working with flooding issues that occur there, to things like bicycle lanes and sidewalk improvements. There's a lot of double parking and parking on sidewalks that happen in that area. There's talks of installing planters along some of it to maybe it's also a heat desert, so like provide green heat mitigation there. So the recommendations really run the gamut with the ultimate goal of traffic safety, but it does cover a wide range of things.
Okay, good, because I go by there sometimes on the bus, and it seems like that the sidewalks, especially around the high school, need a little repairing because it's unsafe for kids to walk, and you got elderly people around that area too, so they may trip and fall, as well as anyone crossing the street, especially along Broad and Hunting Park, where it's very heavily populated, and there's been reports of, hit and runs and all that.
And that's the sidewalk I'm especially sympathetic to. I broke my ankle by tripping on a Philadelphia sidewalk last year. So I've been through it. But yeah, that is a great point and I appreciate it. Thank you.
So next up, we have Amani Bay. They're online, but they're going to be presenting on the environmental justice focus groups. Thanks, Amani.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just trying to start my camera up. Here we go. Sorry, 1 second. It's saying that the host has stopped my video from starting.
I can check that out, but you
I'm
can feel free to get started.
Yeah, I'm going to get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Amani Bay. I work in the Office of Long Range Planning at DVRPC, and I'm really happy to be here with you virtually. I'm sorry that it's not in person. I love PPTF meetings. Today, I'm going to speak with you all about the environmental justice focus groups we held to begin the Update Connections 2050 process for our long range plan. I'm not going to speak specifically about the long range plan today, but just so that folks know, the long range plan currently, Connections 2050, is our policy and our financial plan for how we're going to spend $67.3 billion in transportation funding across our region from, at that point, 2022 to 2050. So over 25 years. But today we're going to talk about environmental justice. Allison spoke a bit about our federal requirements, but according to the federal government, environmental justice is really about the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, with respect to any sort of development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So where transportation really comes in, there is we know that transportation affects our air quality. It affects our access to the jobs and getting there in a reasonable amount of time. It affects property values and rent, and it also affects our access to food and our general quality of life. So there are two ways that the federal government has ensured that environmental justice is a requirement within the transportation planning process. So one way is through an executive order, which really looks at making sure that as we go forward in the planning process, we're not disproportionately impacting people with burdens of transportation projects, such as, all of the highways with air quality impacts are always in low income or racial minority areas. But then there's also Title VI, which makes sure that we are correcting and remediating discriminatory programs and policies and activities within the planning process. So there's been programs like Reconnecting Communities, which is looking at making it so that folks can move a bit more freely in their communities when highways have divided them historically. So between these two laws, we have conducted for Connections 2050 and environmental justice and equity analysis. So we looked at whether or not there were more projects that were burdensome in historically underinvested areas. And we also looked at whether or not those areas were actually seeing investment altogether. And what we found is that pavement and bridge conditions in throughout the region are kind of average. It's not significantly worse in above average racial and ethnic minority and low income communities, but there is more work that needs to be done in order to ensure that the right projects are being developed to improve access to opportunity in communities with above average or well above average, what we call indicators of potential disadvantage, but what I kind of like to think of as those historically disadvantaged groups who often are disenfranchised during the planning processes. So folks who may not speak English or may not be American citizens or who are not white. So in most cases, we saw in Southeast Pennsylvania for our major regional projects that there was actually not enough investment, but there's also the key point of there's a lot of projects that we can't map. This was a mapping exercise. So things like improving the entire SEPTA bus network, improving SEPTA Key, improving regional rail stations and access to regional rail stations are things that sometimes we can't map and analyze in this way. So as we move forward, Allison brought up the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And within that act, or concurrently along with that act, there's this initiative called Justice 40, which there's a lot of new funding in the IIJA, but 40% of funding for electric vehicle infrastructure, so electric vehicle charging, projects that reduce the amount of carbon in our atmosphere, which is going to be really important for climate change, as well as projects that help out with resiliency and decrease congestion are also going to be required to not only make sure that we are investing in communities that are considered disadvantaged or underinvested in, but also to make sure that 40% of all of that money that is spent flows to those communities and benefits those communities, especially those that are overburdened with pollution, which sometimes lines up directly with marginalized and underserved communities. So before we get started on our update Connections 2050, so we're updating our long range plan, before we designed our region-wide environmental justice analysis for this go around, which we're hoping will be more robust than what we did last time, we really wanted to know what the benefits and burdens of different types of transportation projects are on people of color and low income communities in our region. So we wanted to talk to people, and we thought that focus groups would be a good idea. So we put out the call. We let people know that DVRPC was looking for people that have been traditionally left out of the planning process so that they can share information with us about their transportation experiences, what works, what doesn't work, the things that they would like to see in their communities, and we were willing to pay them. So we reached out to community organizations that serve racial, ethnic, minority communities, as well as low-income communities, and asked them if they'd like to host a focus group. So we reached out to Philadelphia's registered community organizations. We reached out to a lot of equity focus groups, a lot of African American and Latino chambers of commerce. We reached out to Asian community organizations as well. We put out a Spanish language ad in Impacto, which reaches our region, reaches Spanish speakers in our region. We also had targeted ads on Facebook, and we had all of our county partners and agencies reach out via Twitter as well. We had an overwhelming response, 422 folks who were interested in signing up for this paid focus group opportunity to let us know about how they experience transportation in our region. And that coalesced into 4 focus groups. We had 2 at public libraries, one at Upper Darby right off of 69th Street and one in Cherry Hill. And we also had 2 online focus groups as well. And these were folks that were low income by their family size, that were people of color. And we wanted to make sure that it was a representative sample of the different kinds of people and different types of backgrounds that we do have in our region. So this is an example of one of the slides that we showed in our focus group. We asked people questions about what they like about transportation, what they don't like, but we also, the bulk of what we talked about was asking them about specific projects, because we had different project categories. So this is a project that is mobility operations, and it's in Eddystone, which is in Delco. And this one is about making safer crosswalks. We also had Vision Zero, which we just heard a bit about. The general Vision Zero is a part of our major regional projects in the long range plan. So we had that. We had some traffic signal upgrades, which is like intelligent transportation systems in Mercer County. We asked people about SEPTA's trolley mod, which will have ADA compliant trolleys, and also improve the trolley shelters as well. We asked people about widening highways, what they thought about that, what their perceived benefits and what concerns that they would have if there was a project like that in their neighborhood. We asked people about improving transit stations, and whether or not a particular location of a transit station's improvement would improve their life, and what they would be concerned about or what they'd be excited about if a transit station in their area, in their neighborhood, would be improved. So everything that I'm sharing is really a screenshot from our website. If you go to dvrpc.org/plan, you can get to our major regional projects web map, where you can search different project categories, as well as look at projects that are like in your area. You can search by keyword here. You can view them on a table. You can see which ones are funded, which ones aren't, which projects have already made their way onto our short-term program, which is the TIP. But some of the key themes that we did hear from these focus areas was that people were really interested in roadway preservation. So making sure that the roads are in safe, usable condition. They were really interested in safety and security when they're taking public transportation, really interested in ADA accessible transit stations, expanded bike lanes, bike share programs, just being able to get around. So that mode choice and connectivity, making sure that if they live in the suburbs, they don't have to come all the way into the city or to an area far away from where they live to have to come back across whatever county that they live in. Or, some people don't have access to public transportation at all. Something else that folks were really concerned about was communication throughout the planning process. So if there is going to be work on a road, how is PennDOT or New Jersey Department of Transportation actually reaching out to folks and letting them know what's going on, how long it's going to last, and general updates, and not just when it's happening, but beforehand, actually speaking to them and getting their feedback about how to make the project as impactful and beneficial as possible. So that was something else. Another thing that we heard a lot was the the need for, as I mentioned before, that state of repair and good and small projects to make sure that our existing transportation is being maintained. But also when you have big projects like the I-95 cap, what about my neighborhood? What kinds of improvements can we have where I live, as opposed to having, once again, to travel somewhere else for recreation, like a trail or a large park. So we're currently wrapping up, and we're going to have a technical report that's going to be published. You should expect that towards the end of the year. Another thing that's coming up towards the end of the year also is we're wrapping up our Update 2050 survey, where we're asking people about the policies that inform how we make the financial plan to spend funding. We've received a lot more funding since the first Connections 2050 plan. So there's even more funding to go around. We're asking people questions about communities, transportation, the economy. We're also adding energy and climate as well as another focus area for folks to weigh in on. And for your time, we're also raffling off a $50 gift card. So there's a QR code here. You can also go to dvrpc.org/update2050. And this really helps guide our future work and guide the projects that make it onto our short-term program, the TIP, as well as projects that we plan to make sure that we're a resilient and sustainable region that serves everybody, and everybody can get around regardless of their ability, regardless of their income. So with that, I'll stop there, and thank you all for your time and your involvement in the PPTF, and try to field any questions that you have.
Thanks, Amani. Just adding to what Amani just said. So if you're in the room and you look back, there's more information up there about the Update Connection 2050. There's surveys in person if you want to take them, or QR codes. But did anybody have any questions for Amani and the work that they're doing with the long range plan and reaching out? Yes, GD. Microphone.
We don't hear any audio for the online.
No, we're
portion.
walking over.
Okay.
It's like Ricky
Cool.
Lake over here. Give us
Totally
a second.
fine. Just wanted to check.
No, you're fine. It's us. There you go.
That's all right. It's a fantastic presentation. In this report, will the information also be sliced for age? For example, the elderly in these communities are particularly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. So we actually had a good response from older folks in our survey response, and in our the folks that showed up to the focus groups. So there will be information, no one's name, but general demographic information when there's a particular point that is brought up by a certain demographic that'll be listed in the report.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Judy. You're good. You can hold on to that one. That one's yours to keep. Or do that. Did anybody else have any questions regarding the work that Amani is doing with the long range plan, or some of the outreach strategies, or if you have any ideas, maybe you didn't hear about it?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How you doing?
I just wanted to know if the incentive, the $50 gift card, was there a measurement of whether or not that was determined to have maybe really improved the number of people that did the survey?
Okay, so we paid people, just for everybody in the room, we paid people for their participation in our focus group, and now we have our survey is going, it's going to go until about December 15th, and from there we'll raffle off $50 gift cards. I was in person at like 4 events, as well as other people in the room were at events throughout the region, and people definitely were we could say, if you take the survey, we had tote bags to give people upon completion, and then we also had the $50 incentive. So our numbers are not final right now. People do have to give us some sort of contact information in order to, be entered into the raffle, because we want to be able to contact them and give them the gift card. But so far, in terms of like anecdotally, it seems like people are interested in the opportunity to win one of the gift cards that we're raffling for the $50.
Okay, here you go. Allison's gonna add something.
Yeah, we do a lot of surveys, and we do see that when we don't have an incentive, we get lower rates of people participating. So incentives are a good way to just spark more interest in it.
Is it just one $50 gift card, or is it more than one?
No, at this point, we have
20.
over 1,000 people who have submitted a survey, but we do have a number of gift cards. So it's not just one, it's not one person.
Yeah, you have the opportunity to win one of 20 gift cards.
It doesn't say, it just says $50 as if.
Oh, when you definitely take the QR code in the back, you'll see it on your, it says it. But I would like to hear from you. Do you think that having an incentive is helpful? Like, as a community member, do you think that's something that your community would like?
I definitely think so. And mostly because in my experience with community, the gift card itself and the monetary amount is really useful. So there are things that people can't get with food stamps that they can get with that $50 gift card. So just to be able to even learn about transportation overall and then participate in a survey and then possibly win a $50 gift card is very helpful to community. So I just think that I just was not sure if it just meant one, but it's more than one. So that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Amani, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I definitely agree. During our focus groups, we saw over and over again that folks were more interested in having like some sort of gift card or Cash App delivery. But for the compensation for the focus groups, which is different from the survey, we were only able to do direct deposit or mail people checks. So we do know that we miss people who maybe don't have like access to like a bank account to be able to get a direct deposit, or don't have like a stable mailing address to get a check. So hopefully, like, I definitely understand the draw of the versatility of a gift card, that you can just spend like you would spend any debit card on what you want to spend it on.
And for the focus groups, each person who came got a check, or if they wanted it to go straight to their bank, they could do that. And it was $100 for the online ones and $125 for the people who were in person. So that was like a bit more of a heavy lift. So that's why that one was different. But we're still testing out and figuring out what's the best way to compensate for people's time.
Is there a question in back? Hold on, I'm coming to you.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I have two questions. The first one is, you may not know the answer to this, but why aren't these incentives used for other public agencies? Okay. Surveys and public participation, like periods. And the second one is, how does DVRPC influence like other agencies' choice of projects to make sure that underrepresented or historically disadvantaged communities don't get affected by highways splitting their neighborhoods?
Oh, this is Allison. I can answer the easy question, and then Amani can answer the much tougher question. So federal funding is very tricky to spend. So when we do an incentive, we're actually not using federal funding. We're using the tax money that we get from the counties, that they contribute a certain amount of money into DVRPC to match our federal transportation dollars, because every federal transportation dollar, depending on the flavor of funding or the type of funding it is, has to have some kind of what's called a local match. So we get a local match from our counties, and that's a pool of money that's a little bit more easier. We have more flexibility in spending that funding, so that our leadership has decided to use that flexible funding and put it towards incentives, including food is really important. There's a lot, like, federal regulations around how to spend the transportation dollars is always changing. So I would say there's hope in the future that U.S. Department of Transportation will make it easier to spend federal funding on incentives, including food. But right now, that is very difficult to do on the financial side. And then Amani, do you want to take that? Oh, go ahead, Shoshana.
And before we get to the second question, Wendell, if you could go to the front and switch the camera to the room, since we're having such a good discussion, I feel like we're going to go a little bit longer. We're just seeing a disembodied podium. And I can tell the way that you're like walking around the room and doing a great job. So I'd love to see it from over here. But Amani, feel free to go ahead.
So you asked an amazing question. I love this question. It's a part of my job. There are about 3 ways I will kind of break down how DVRPC influences the choices that our partners make. So first, we're a region. We include Pennsylvania counties and New Jersey counties, but that means that we work with Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and New Jersey Department of Transportation. The Departments of Transportation, as well as all of the counties, as well as SEPTA and New Jersey Transit and PETCO, all sit on our board. Whenever there's a project that needs to be added into our Transportation Improvement Program, our TIP, which is our short-term plan, where we're spending money on transportation throughout the year, that has to go before the board and everybody has to vote. We have voting members and non-voting members for that side. So that's one way. Another way is during the TIP update process. So we're currently in a Pennsylvania TIP update. And for both the TIP and the long range plan, what we have there is something called the TIP long range plan benefit evaluation criteria. We just updated that before this update for the long range plan and for the Pennsylvania TIP. And there are 3 screening items before we even score our projects to decide. It's a piece of the decision-making process for our counties. We give every project a score based on their benefit and their cost. So the top 2 criteria there are safety and asset conditions. So how raggedy is the road? How raggedy is the bridge? And are there crashes at this location? And does any improvement not just keep it as safe as the facility is right now, but makes it even safer? So those are the top 2. Right under that is equity. And we have screening for equity. So if they're suggesting a project to us and it goes through 3 census tracts that have communities of concern or underserved communities, then it has to be screened. And we're looking at we have a matrix for the benefits and burdens of the project. And if the burdens of the project outweigh the benefits, then the county or the sponsor needs to talk to DVRPC and show documentation that they've been out in the community, making an effort to communicate, empower, and involve people in that in the planning process. So that's one of the ways that the benefit criteria works to improve. We have another program. So like that third leg is something that Shoshana works on as well, but we're looking at our historic investment in communities of color and low-income communities and communities burdened by environmental justice issues, and trying to create a pipeline so that more of those projects, so a project on the tip already has had some sort of study done on it before it gets to a preliminary engineering or design or ultimately to construction and the project is completed. So making sure that projects are in communities that may not normally have studies are getting the study so then they can get into the pipeline to making it on the tip. What I've seen behind the scenes in terms of our committees that work to kind of agree and negotiate on what county gets what project is our DVRPC staff, as well as our other county partners right now, are really pushing each other to focus on communities of concern. Like we have certain funding for bridges that we actually have control, or we as in the counties, our agency partners actually have control over setting up. And then the state DOTs also have their own mandates of how much safety money has to be spent in certain communities as well. So like those are some of the areas where we influence the projects that are being chosen. Another way that's done is, people at our board making comments that the board members who are counties and people and agencies proposing projects have to hear about problems that are in and around the region that get started on like that study pipeline, which then may or may not become a full-blown project or some other form of like quick implementation or remediation in terms of like adding a stop sign or taking one away or change it to a different type of intersection. So that is kind of a brief way of how we influence, but there's a lot of other factors such as like it's not just that we have $2 billion over the next 4 years for Pennsylvania projects and we can spend it on whatever. There's like buckets and pots of money that can only be used for certain things. And then it's a question of how much of a priority it is to county elected officials, which means they need to hear from their constituents. So that's another way projects are influenced outside of DVRPC as well. So I hope I answered your question, but if you have any more questions related to this, I do have my email address. I would really love to get some like graphics or something out about how the decision-making process is made. We often talk about it in the tip update presentations, but I can share some of that too if folks are interested.
Thank you, Amani. We're going to go to our last presentation, but I forgot to tell everybody this before we started. So with the microphones, the trick is you press the button that says power on the right one time, the green light comes on, then this gray thing is actually a button and that presses when it comes on red. So sorry for not telling you all that. But we're going to head to our last presentation, which is going to be a good one.
And then if you could also switch the camera back to the podium.
Yes, chef.
Thank you.
Did I pull up the slides?
No, I believe
Okay.
I have them for you. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, sure. In the meantime, I'm Marissa Volk. I work in the Office of Transit, Bike, and Pedestrian Planning. So today I want to present to you a project we are in the process of completing in Trenton, New Jersey. It's Trenton Bike Plan. So it's a citywide bike plan that'll have really significant impacts for the city of Trenton. So I'm going to discuss our engagement effort today. Like I said, the report isn't out yet, but if you're interested, I would love to connect so I can send that to you when it is out. You can go to the next slide. So the Trenton Bike Plan, what's proposed in the plan, it's a citywide bike network that will add bike lanes and make other design changes to streets across the city. So if you think of a bike lane, those will be included, but there's also like a lot of signage, a lot of other planning that needs to go into a bike plan. So that would also be included in this plan. The goals of the plan would be to increase safety for all road users, but especially bicyclists. We know that bicycling is an affordable way to get around, and we want to make people who are currently biking in Trenton safer, as well as invite people who maybe don't bike because they don't feel safe. We want to provide them a safe place to ride their bike in the streets as well. Another goal of this plan was to increase access to local destinations. So that might be churches, schools, social services, parks, trails. And we kind of asked people about what other destinations they're trying to get to within the city. And we were really focusing on Trenton itself. We did hear from people outside of Trenton, but we were really prioritizing Trenton residents. And within Trenton residents, we were really prioritizing people who currently bike and hearing from people who are experiencing this firsthand. And one other thing to note with the plan is we really wanted to make continuous bike lanes, because I know you like sometimes see a small segment of bike lanes and then it kind of just disappears and you're just put out into the street. And so we really wanted to focus on creating like high quality protected bike lanes in the city. You can go to the next slide. And so why outreach was so important in general, but especially for this plan, the city recently passed a complete and green streets ordinance. And so technically this requires them to have complete streets. That means planning for all road users, not just cars, which is what we really have seen across the country in the past, 40 years. So complete streets is the idea that bicyclists have their own space on the street, walkers have their own space on the street with high quality sidewalks, to go back to Jared's comment. So planning for all kinds of people to be able to use the street. And in Trenton, there is a very limited space within the street. So similar to Philly, the roads are very narrow. It's a very historic city. So in order to fit bike lanes that do feel really safe and protected, that would require on some streets reducing or removing on-street parking, which is really prevalent across Trenton. And we also were proposing changing two-way streets to one-way streets in order to get more space for bikes. And we know that these are really like lightning rod issues that people really get heated about, especially people who drive and use on-street parking. So we knew that these were really, really big trade-offs, and we really needed to hear from people who bike, would they use a bike lane? Would they feel safe in it? Or would they continue riding on the sidewalk? And we also needed to hear from other types of street users, drivers included, of would they be willing to give up parking to gain these other spaces on the street? And lastly, Trenton is very diverse. It's a majority minority city. 30% of households don't own a car and 70% own one car or less. So a lot of people are biking in Trenton right now. 35% of households don't speak English at home. Most of that percentage are Spanish speakers. So all of our materials were in English and Spanish. And we also had on-site translators at the event. So our marketing materials, but also when you show up at the event, there's someone to walk you through and give feedback about the plan. And lastly, residents may be unfamiliar with bike lanes. There are about 2 bike lanes in Trenton right now, and they both are pretty standard. And so we were proposing different kinds of bike lanes that people may have never seen before. So we knew it was really important not only to gather feedback, but also educate people about different types of bike lanes and their benefits. You can go to the next slide. So the first thing we did in terms of engagement was a public survey, and that's kind of like the knee-jerk reaction to do a survey. And it was a good first step for us, but we really didn't hear from the people that we were trying to reach, which really was people in Trenton and people who are biking now, and like a demographically and geographically representative sample of the city. So talking to people all across the city in different areas and neighborhoods, and also people who look like residents in the city. So we heard from 274 people. For context, there's about 90,000 people in Trenton, so we really didn't hear from a high percentage. And of that number, we heard from a little more than half people who bike, currently less than half people who don't, half and half people who live in Trenton and people who don't live in Trenton. We heard from a large percentage of white folks, which was definitely not representative of Trenton. And we only heard from 6 people in Spanish. We had a Spanish survey. And again, that really didn't align with reaching folks who are representative of Trenton. So we knew that this wasn't enough, and it gave us kind of high level ideas about what people are seeing on the streets when they're biking. But we knew we needed to do a lot more to reach people. So you can go to the next slide. So we did 3 in-person events, kind of stemming from this survey. We had them on different days of the week and different times to try to reach as many people as possible. So we did one event on a weeknight. We did one on a Saturday afternoon. We did one on a Sunday afternoon, hoping to reach people after they were leaving church. And at these events, we not only were talking about the bike plan, but we were also talking about trails in Trenton and Vision Zero, which is a really safety focused project or plan that we work on to try to get to 0 deaths due to crashes in the street. So the reason why we combine these plans together is because we knew if someone's biking, all of these things matter to them. Most likely they might be biking partially on the street, they might be using the trails to get to where they need to go, and they probably are concerned about crashes, just being someone that doesn't have the protection of the car around them. So we wanted really to get a holistic view of people's feedback who are biking, and all of these things kind of play into that experience. And we also went to different neighborhoods in Trenton. And that was really helpful to meet people where they were, get passersby, and not just pop up in downtown where maybe people aren't there on the weekends. A lot of people don't work downtown. So we really tried to reach into all different neighborhoods of Trenton. And lastly, we partnered with local organizations. Trenton Cycling Revolution is an advocacy group in Trenton. Artworks, we also partnered with to do some art activities. And we also partnered with Greater Mercer TMA, which ran kind of like a kids bike obstacle course. And we compensated all those event partners for their work because they are community organizations. We're engaging them to do work at the end of the day for these events. And they really helped us to spread the word as well, because DVRPC is based in Philadelphia and we cover a whole region. We don't know every city, every neighborhood, as well as the people who live there and engage with people every day and have their own kind of communities and audiences. So they really helped us spread the word about the events, and also helped us figure out where people might be comfortable meeting, where people gather already. So that really helped with the event's success and getting people to show up. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of what these events actually looked like, first there was these kind of attractors, and you can see that on the left side of the screen. Those were visible things in the street meant to entice people passing by. Trenton really wanted to engage people who maybe aren't interested in coming to a city meeting, or have never felt welcome in a city meeting. And so we really wanted things on the street to kind of pique people's interest and have them ask, what's going on? So that included a pop-up bike lane, which was just up for a day so people could kind of see what it looked like in a street. We had participatory art activities, so folks could spray paint kind of bike themed stuff. We had Mr. Softy ice cream truck giving away free ice cream. So that was something really big that people could see and get excited about. Trenton Cycling Revolution was doing free bike tune-ups as well. So all of these kind of things, they weren't by chance, they were very intentional to reach people who hopefully are biking. So if you're biking, a free bike tune-up sounds awesome. If you're not biking, hopefully you like ice cream or pizza. So we try to appeal to kind of a range of people. We had the bike obstacle course. I know that's a very small photo, but that was, we also wanted families to feel welcome. So we try to have kids activities, although we didn't have dedicated childcare. We hope to engage kids as well as adults. And in some cases where we could, we shut down the street. Photo's very small, but we shut down the street where we could in order to even have like a bigger on-street presence. And we had huge banners too that kind of showed what was going on. And in addition to that, we had a registration table outside. So kind of once people were like, oh, I want ice cream, there was people that they could talk to who would let them know kind of what was going on. So once we hopefully got their attention, the stations inside included an educational video that showed what it's like to ride in a bike lane. We filmed some GoPro footage in Philadelphia where we do have different kinds of bike lanes to kind of show what we're illustrating in the plan and the proposed bike network. We also had a hands-on activity for folks to build their own street. That's the second photo down in the middle. So that kind of illustrated how a street could be built with bike lanes, and we could kind of see what people cared about. We also had large boards with images from the GoPro footage showing what it's like to ride in a bike lane, and we had descriptions of each element of what that was like, and we had people kind of respond what they liked and what they didn't like. So we really tried to show bike lanes in a variety of ways to really have folks fully understand before we asked for their feedback. And we also had the on-street bike lane. Not a lot of people rode in it, but I think it was helpful to just see how much space it takes up in a street and how it feels to have your own space in the street if you're biking. And lastly, we used a tiered system of giveaways. So very similar to what other folks talked about today, we had a $50 grocery store gift card to Food Bazaar in Trenton. So that was hopefully to appeal to anyone, but also people who might not be biking currently. Our other big giveaway was bikes themselves. So we gave away BMX, commuter bikes, kids bikes, and those were kind of rewards for going through the whole event. So we had these little stamp cards. It's very small, but we had 8 feedback stations. And so if you went to 5 of them, you could enter into the giveaway once. And if you went to all 8 of them, you could enter into the giveaway twice. Because we knew 8 is a lot to do. And so we wanted to kind of give people incentives along the way to kind of keep engaging. And so these stamp cards were given away at the registration, and folks were kind of oriented to the event, and they knew that their time was valued and they could win something at the end. And the ice cream, I forgot to mention, and the bike tune-ups, those were also smaller giveaways. So if folks came in, maybe they didn't have a lot of time, they just watched the educational video. They got 2 tickets, and one of them was for bike tune-up, one of them was for ice cream. So they would still get something for their time, even if they didn't want to come back in and give feedback. So we really did try to appeal to someone who had a little bit of time, someone who was really interested, was going to engage. And we found that a lot of people really did go to all 8 stations. And that was really surprising to me because I thought 8 would be too many, but it really did work in this case. So that was surprising. You can go to the next slide. So I talked a lot about what we did, and it sounds fun, hopefully, and cool, but it all costs money. And so Allison was talking a little bit about this earlier, but we had, as part of our project budget, money to spend on these events. So in total, we spent a little under $8,000 for those 3 events. But within those 3 events, we had 3 plans, and we got kind of a long list of things for that amount of money. So it is a lot of money. It's not insignificant. At the end of the day, it kind of broke down to $2,500 per event. But I think in terms of the feedback that we got, it was really worth it. We really did reach a lot of a lot of people loved the Mr. Softy. So in the end, I would say we engaged probably between 300 and 400 people. So if you remember the survey in the beginning, we engaged under 300, but it really wasn't the groups of people we were trying to prioritize. And at these events, the interpreters were really well used. A lot of people were going through answering and engaging in Spanish. A lot of people were cyclists. We asked people to identify whether they had biked in the last 6 months or not. And we found that 60% of people who attended were people who are biking in the city now. 40% weren't, which is also really important because we need to hear from everyone. But these events, although we engaged similar number of people, we really did get people that the city was really interested in reaching, and it was really crucial to reach. And we got all this fun stuff too. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of lessons learned, I would say that for us, it was really crucial to identify who's critical to engage at the beginning. So we really made all these decisions very intentionally. We went to the neighborhoods, and I think, again, that was really important to meet people where they are. Partnering with local organizations, I think they were like the backbone of these events. They really told us, like, yes, people are going to be really interested in Mr. Softy, and like, no, they're not going to care about, I don't know, some idea we had that was really off base. And in addition to partnering and paying those organizations, they also, we had volunteers at each feedback station. So we had some like planners who can kind of speak to more of the technical things behind the plan, but we also had locals, and a lot of those people were part of Trenton Cycling Revolution or part of Artworks. And they really believed in this plan. And so they volunteered to talk to people about the plan too. So it's kind of a mix of familiar faces and a mix of people who had really done the nitty-gritty pieces of the plan. And I think that worked really well to feel approachable to people, to hopefully be like, hey, that's my neighbor. I feel like I can go talk to them. The tiers of incentives, to go back to your comment earlier about the gift cards, I think it really did motivate people to go to all 8 stations. They really wanted to enter the giveaway twice, which was really exciting to see. Yeah, if I had to do it over, I would definitely spend the money on that because that really did help. I think also engaging in one-on-one conversations, and part of that was having like a lot of volunteers at each activity, both locals and planners. We were able to have one-on-one conversations, and the on-site translators had a similar approach where they would go through the whole event with one person or a small group of people and make it really easy to have conversations. I think having a strong on-street presence was also really crucial. We mostly had walk-ups, even though we did a lot of advanced outreach in English and Spanish. We did flyers, paid social media, a lot of the things that Gina talked about earlier, if not the whole list. It was mostly walk-ups. And I think in the end, that was really great because we still reached who we needed to. But if I could do it again, I would maybe try something different for the marketing side of things because that didn't really attract folks. Yeah, and I think all in all, it was a lot of work and a lot of money, but these relationships that we've built with these partners, with folks that we talked to at the events, had really great conversations with. We have ongoing projects in the city of Trenton, so those relationships just keep building, and those are leading to new projects and like more deeply ingrained and meaningful work. And so I think the benefits of putting the time and the money and the effort into this really are going to continue, hopefully for many years. And then lastly, I guess to just close out, this is just a map to show people that we engaged at all 3 events. So cyclists or bikers are in pink and non-bikers are in yellow. So you can see there's a mix of both. And between 3 event venues, the stars on the map, we really did get people like from those neighborhoods. And in the end, we did reach people kind of across Trenton. And the dots outside of the map were people who didn't live in Trenton, which is great that they came, but we really did hear from the people in Trenton, which is who we really wanted to hear from. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
In an effort to get those who are online out at the 7:30 time, everybody who's here in person, you're welcome to talk to Marissa afterwards, but we can take one question if anybody has a question that they want to ask Marissa regarding this.
Yeah.
Julian?
Thank you.
Oh, I don't know if it's on. Okay.
So, as I understand, the purpose of the event was like engage rather than to persuade. but do you think that there was any non-bikers or people that didn't initially see themselves as stakeholders here that might have actually turned into an advocate for this program?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think so. I thought that we would get a lot of pushback from people who don't bike about especially the parking removal or, reducing parking. Um, and I think we did see that. We saw some people be kind of wary of that. But we asked that question kind of in a way um where we were asking people if they would try it for a few months and see how they felt, and either we could put the street back how it was, or if people liked it, it could go before council to be like a permanent change. So I think that led to some open-mindedness about things, knowing that it wouldn't be permanent. And I also think we asked people if they answered yes to that question. We asked people on which streets. So I also think that people get really defensive about like their parking spot in front of their house. So that was really helpful, I think, to make it a little bit more objective. Like, are there streets you see people aren't using the parking, that it might be a little bit easier, or like people don't need that parking? Yeah, so I think people were more open-minded to that than I expected them to be. And in general, like the less pointed questions about parking, I found that people who answered with yellow, which was like the color for drivers, they were generally positive, because we did like go through all that feedback too. And people seemed to really understand the benefits of having a bike lane. Yeah, it was really cool to see. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was a profile of who tends to bike in Trenton now, and if there's plans for a municipal bike share. I guess starting with the bike share, Trenton Cycling Revolution, they have a program for folks who want a bike, but maybe have a barrier to getting one on their own. So they have a program where you can learn how to repair a bike. And once you go through that program, you get a bike at the end, because they have a lot of bikes that are donated to them, and they fix up and they give away. So that's a pretty cool program. That's grassroots, so it's not municipal, but they do have something. In terms of who tends to bike in Trenton now, I don't think we have an official data source, but like from observation and from talking to Trenton Cycling Revolution, other folks who are there every day, it is a lot of people who might be ineligible for a driver's license, young folks. A lot of people are biking to school, folks who were maybe not born in the US and aren't eligible for a license, biking to work. And yeah, I think just in general, a lot of low income households are relying on bikes, or like don't have a car to get around. So they might be using public transit too, but the bus is kind of infrequent. Yeah, so public transit can kind of be hit or miss. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you to everyone. There's just a couple housekeeping announcements before the meeting's over. If you're online, thank you so much for staying with us. If you're in person, the doors are locked, so it's not really a problem. Next slide. All right, so again, this is just going to be a shameless plug. If you are interested in keeping track of what DVRPC is doing, knowing more about the projects and some of the things we talked about today before you come to our office to hear them for us, feel free to sign up for our monthly newsletter, which you probably are signed up for if you're here in person. Feel free to share that monthly newsletter with friends, neighborhood associations, colleagues, anybody that you see that you think should take part in this. That's the whole point. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share feedback and opinions and thoughts with us. And please keep coming to the meetings. Next. Amani mentioned this earlier in their presentation, but we are doing an Update Connection 2050 survey still for the long range plan. You have 3 options if you haven't done it yet. Maybe you saw what's in your neighborhood at some point over the fall. But you can do it online. You can do it on your phone by scanning the QR code. This QR code is also on those postcards on this table, that table, a table outside, and that big poster back there. And if you have like 5 minutes, it literally takes 5 minutes. There's some hard copies in the back and you can take it now. Next slide. And lastly, I'm going to mention again, we are accepting new members for the Public Participation Task Force. We try to make sure that they represent the region, which doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply. The region is large and wide, and we want to get people from everywhere. So if you know anybody in Gloucester County, please let them know that we're looking for applicants. And these are just some of the benefits. If you would like to take flyers to share again with your neighborhood association, friends, cool college kids that you know, they're available here again on the table that says Wi-Fi. If you're online, if you go to the public participation website, in the chat box, you can see the flyer there as well, and the application is also there online. So please feel free to share it with anybody. We really want to make sure that we're hearing a good variety of voices and that we're getting great input from across the region. So it's not always what you see today. Miss Bonita, again, Jared, Mary is gone, but they can tell you just the kind of work that they do as task force members. Next slide.
I believe that is the last slide.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for being here. Don't forget to share your thoughts on any of our boards. If you're online, sharing your thoughts, ideas on how we can better communicate and reach out to your neighbors online. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming. Please take more food if you're in person, and feel free to ask any of us questions as you meander out. Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.